Hello, Doug here. Welcome to our daily reflection for Tuesday, September the 8th. Today's reading is from Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 to 9. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, and yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, "I must turn aside and look at this great sight, and see why the bush is not burned up." When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, "Moses, Moses." And he said, "Here I am." Then he said, "Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." He said further, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, "I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land, to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey." Moses had a fairly quiet life, looking after the flocks of his father-in-law in the wilderness near Horeb, and yet it took a burning bush to cause him to stop and listen. We live in a world often called the time-starved generation because of the busyness of our lives. We seldom have time to take notice of what is happening around us. We often have no time to listen or to pay attention. One of the positives of the COVID-19 pandemic is that we have been granted time from daily hectic routines to take a breath and look around. I would like to share some thoughts of Ruth Haley Barton from her book, Strengthening the Soul of Your Leadership. This book, by the way, is found in our church library for you to read more, should you be interested. She says, "Have we stopped to see where God is at work in our lives? When we take the time to pay attention, we never know when or where God will show up. And yet, when we take even a brief moment in our spiritual practices to move into quiet solitude and communion with God, we give up control and allow God to be God in our life, rather than a thought in our head. In that place of seeking, we can listen for the still, small voice of God telling us who we really are and what we are called to be. At that time, we can allow our soul to say what it needs to say to God, and discovering what God might want to say to us. This practice of paying attention awakens us to what is extraordinary in the midst of the ordinary in our lives. It allows us to realize that we are often standing on holy ground. Do we have the discipline to take the time in silence to listen to what God wants to say? To hear the things that we might otherwise not notice? The voice of God is calling us in our own wilderness. All of us have burning bushes in our lives, places that shimmer with grace, alerting us to the possibility that God is at work. We simply need to give belief to that which burns in our own hearts. As God reveals something in our life that may be a burning bush, we need to consider taking time to ponder what it might mean, with willingness to follow the wisdom or the guidance that follows. We need to see the capacity to see the burning bushes in the middle of our own lives, and have enough sense and courage to turn aside, take off our shoes, and pay attention. If we live our lives in response to the one who is calling to us out of the burning bushes in our own lives, we may discover that God is closer to us than we think. We may realize that He walks beside us every step of our lives, through the rough and the smooth, through thick and thin, through the easy and the unbearable. Through these experiences, we discover that God has something to say to each of us if we take the time to turn aside and listen. Ultimately, we may discover that we are standing on holy ground more often than we might think. I would like to end with a poem by Ted Loder from Guerrillas of Grace. O God, let something essential and joyful happen in me now, something like the blooming of hope and faith, like a grateful heart, like a surge of awareness of how precious each moment is, that now, not next time, now is the occasion to take off my shoes, to see every bush afire, to lead and whirl with a neighbor, to gulp the air as sweet wine until I've drunk enough to dare to speak the tender word, thank you. I love you. You're beautiful. Let's live together, forever, beginning now. And I'm a fool for Christ's sake. Have a wonderful and blessed day, everyone.